The board of directors can and should play a critical role for the company as it engages around issues of diversity, equity, and inclusion. The reality for many, maybe most companies in this time is that human capital is a critical asset for the company. Before COVID, we would have said the key assets walk out the door at the end of the day. I guess now we say they log off Zoom at the end of the day, but clearly businesses, especially those in knowledge-intensive industries, need to be and should be focused on attracting, retaining, and motivating their talent. And as a consequence, I think it makes sense for boards to be very active in many decisions that directly impact inclusion and diversity and equity issues. Obviously, that starts with hiring the CEO, populating the C-suite. It's reflected in the makeup of the board itself and the candidates who are brought forward, and then a range of other decisions and input as it relates to company policies, compensation structure and policy, determination of the workforce composition, ensuring pay equity, a number of topics that compensation committees in particular should be plugged in on. And so I think board members appropriately are and should be asking questions and requiring data from management teams. How are they hiring and retaining and motivating talent? How are they ensuring that companies reflect the communities and other stakeholders surrounding the company, as well as ensuring that the company is protected against the risk of negative perception, negative reality, lawsuits, or other dimensions that can come about from a failure to appropriately address an inclusion of related issues. My professional experience as an openly gay man, both as an executive and now as a board member, has frankly consistently been positive. I don't think that's an accident. I think that I have attempted to choose and hopefully have been selected by bosses, managers, colleagues, mentors who support diversity, who have advocated for diversity in their own careers. And that has certainly flowed through as I've undertaken board roles and participated in board searches. I think, for example, about in my last executive role, CEO of a publicly traded biotech company who had a very strong commitment to diversity in his leadership team, and who built a leadership team that I was really pleased and proud to be a part of, in which women, people of color, LGBT executives were in fact in the majority in the C-suite in that company. And similarly extended that focus on diversity into building the board. I think as a director, one of the things I've been particularly cognizant of is how important visibility is as a member of the board. I make it a point to come out as early as possible in screening and interview processes, ensuring that my life, my family are not a secret. And if that is going to be a problem for a potential company or board, I'd much rather know that up front. Fortunately, it has not been. And in fact, quite the opposite. I've had some terrific experiences with the companies where I serve on the board. One example that comes to mind, I happened sheerly by accident at the San Francisco Pride Parade a few years ago to happen across the employee resource group contingent from one of the companies where I serve on the board. And that set of employees, both gay and straight allies, could not have been more enthusiastic than to identify, oh, we've got a board member who identifies with our community, and both in person at the event and subsequently through emails and phone calls, received such positive feedback from the employees to know that their demographic was represented at the most senior levels of the company, and in fact, all the way up to the boardroom. 2020 has certainly been a disruptive year, and who knows what the future will bring. We may be headed for a period of time where there is a lot more ambiguity and uncertainty in the world. Uh, Speaking as a board member, I have been really pleased to see the way that the boards I serve on and the boards of the companies I advise have really stepped up to that challenge, I think, in a pretty impressive way. Uh, COVID, for example, has caused boards, especially in the life sciences where I work, to have to step forward meaningfully in thinking about what can their science and their programs bring, as well as, together with other businesses, how they respond to the COVID emergency and a whole range of workforce contingency and business planning efforts around that. Uh, COVID has appropriately been literally agenda item number one at board meeting after board meeting as companies come to grips with that. Similarly, visibility and engagement of board members with employees, with leadership team members, especially in this environment where so much of business is being conducted virtually, especially in this environment where issues of social justice, politics are increasingly making their way into companies and into the boardroom. I think it's important for board members to step up, and I've been really pleased to see board members doing that. And also identifying and using the resources available at the board level, policies, recruiting approaches, ensuring that companies are engaging actively with investors and other stakeholder groups on these key issues, and at minimum keeping up with, but ideally getting out ahead of some of the key trends we're seeing in the world. I think there's really a unique opportunity in this window of time for boards to step forward in a way that they might simply not have needed to in the past. California's AB 979, which was just signed by Governor Newsom at the end of September, I hope will be a watershed moment in board diversity. It makes me proud to be a Californian, despite all of the challenges that this state and the nation are facing. And I think 979 has the potential to be important in at least a couple of dimensions. As a quick overview, AB 979 requires that publicly traded companies headquartered here in California diversify their boards to include one or more members of underrepresented communities, which are defined to include representation by race and ethnicity, as well as sexual orientation and gender identity. This is the first time, to the best of my knowledge, that those requirements have been put in place for publicly traded companies at the state level. And I hope that this bill will serve both to further the actual diversification of boards as companies look for a wider pool of candidates and seek to ensure demographic representation in their companies. I also hope that it will serve to move the needle on companies reporting about the demographics of their board. One of the key challenges that governance experts and advocates have faced as we talk about board diversity is that it can be very difficult literally to gather the data on, for example, does a particular director identify as a member of a racial minority, or does a director identify as LGBTQ? There isn't typically a forum or an established reporting mechanism for directors to self-identify or for boards to report. And I'm hopeful that this legislation, together with similar efforts on the part of institutional investors, will continue to encourage more companies to embrace the kind of detailed demographic reporting that will enable us to understand what is the current state of play and are we making progress toward building more diverse corporate boards.